Okay. Yeah. So we're discussing here a bunch of statements from Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, and they're all Kriyas HaTorah related, but specifically Kriyas HaTorah as it relates to the Dalet Parshas, right? We know there's 4 Parshas, the special 4 Parshas that are associated somewhat with the month of Adar. We have the Parshas Shkolim, then Zachar, then we have Parshas Para, and then Parshas HaChodesh. And what we're going to be spending a good portion of today's daf on is just trying to figure out how we handle Kriyas HaTorah when those happens. When do we set those weeks? When do we skip weeks? So I wouldn't call it technical, but the Gemara is going to go through some cheshbon, and I'll try to point out some things as we go through it that may be helpful to understand it. But it's a pretty straightforward daf, and I'll go through it. So we had finished off discussing yesterday was the time when you take out 3 Sifrei Torah. We said one was when it's Rosh Chodesh Adar falling out by Parshas Shkolim, right? So it falls out on Shabbos. You have Rosh Chodesh, you have Shabbos, and you have Parshas Shkolim. We saw also when Rosh Chodesh falls out, Rosh Chodesh Tevis falls out on Shabbos. You have Rosh Chodesh, you have Shabbos, and you have Chanukah. And the Gemara had said that you need both for various different reasons. Then we had also said that what happens if it falls in the middle of the week, and we had an explanation. That was the beginning of the Rav Yitzchak Nafcha discussion. We're really just going to be picking up right there in the middle, and we're going to be picking up from Itmar, 2 lines from the bottom of the Gemara. Itmar, what are we talking about here? We're talking about Shkolim. Just as a very, very brief understanding, Shkolim, Parsha Shkolim, where do we open up from the Torah? We open up to Parshas Kisisa, which just in the order of the Parshas goes Tetzaveh, right? Truma Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayakal Pekude. So the important ones for us are going to be Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayakal. So now what happens if Parsha Shkolim falls out during the time of the year when the Shabbos happens to be Vata Tetzaveh? And the way we're going to be reading this Gemara here is that it falls out during the week. So Parshas, right? So Chodesh Adar falls out in the middle of the week, so that now you're being makdim to the prior Shabbos. So now you're reading Atat Tetzaveh, because that's the parsha of the week, but now you have to add Shkolim in. So it comes out that you're going to be reading Atat Tetzaveh, you're going to get to the end of Tetzaveh, and then you're going to L'chura add on the Haftorah straight into Kisisa. It's right there. It's the next parsha. So what's the issue? The issue is it's not really nicker that you're doing it for the mitzvah of Shkolim. It's mashma that maybe the guy who was about Kaira didn't know where to stop, and so you just went a little extra. It's only 6 psukim, the entire parsha Shkolim. So it could look like you're not really doing the mitzvah.
We had mentioned this before in the context of the 3-year cycle of Eretz Yisrael. This is a proof.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that it is a proof.
It'll come up. It'll come up again. Yeah, exactly. So it says like this. Meaning, and again, the reason why I said it the way I said it was because there are certain Rishonim who say that this is talking about where it falls out on the Shabbos. And now we're talking about that it's Rosh Chodesh on Shabbos. So you have Atat Tetzaveh, you have Rosh Chodesh. And the problem they have there is then what's the whole discussion? If you're going to be laning Korbani Lachmi anyways, so it's obviously, and that's going to be in between Atat Tetzaveh and Kisisa, there's no hecker. So, then you have a hecker. You don't have to come onto the whole question. So, they have to work that out. But here, we're going to go with the simple understanding that it's falling during the week where you're now laning it on Shabbos, just Atat Tetzaveh and Shkolim. So what's the halacha? Amri b'tzak nafcha karushisam of Atat Tetzaveh. And after another reminder, remember in their times they would lane 7 aliyahs, and those 7 aliyahs would be the total aliyah, and what they call the 7th aliyah would be what we would do the equivalent for maftir. So we lane 8 aliyahs really. We have 7 aliyahs. We make kaddish, and then we do a maftir for a couple of psukim, and then we do the haftarah. They would just lane 7, and the 7th would be the aliyah that we would call maftir, and then they would do the haftarah after that. So Dr. Yitzchak Nafcha karushisam evatet tetzaveh ad kisisa, meaning you basically lane 6 aliyahs, the whole parsha of tetzaveh. V'chad mechisisa ad ve'osisa, and then the 7th aliyah, you start from kisisa and you go straight to ve'osisa kir and the chayshis, which is really for Yidaber, the pasuk before it, meaning you go this first 6 plukim into kisisa, which is parsha shkolim. Meaning he says, don't worry about the fact that it's not obvious. He says that's okay.
They didn't do Kaddish back then.
They didn't do Kaddish. Kaddish would have been the teretz. For us nowadays, this is sort of not negay a little bit because we anyways are going to do the maftir after Kaddish, and so therefore it's very obvious that it's not part of the regular laning, and
they couldn't do Kaddish because they hadn't finished the 7 aliyah.
Yeah, they're in the middle.
Yeah.
Meaning the whole concept of it being oilam min aminyan is only negeya if you don't split it up. Okay, continues the Gemara. Amar Abaye, he has a kasha. Amr ukume hu de kamuk mehasam. He's going to say exactly what we said before. It's going to look like the Balkai just read a little too much. It's not going to be nikka that you're doing it l'tzarech parsha shkalim, and therefore he doesn't like the suggestion. El Amar Abaye karu shisa mevata tetzava ve'ad ve'asisa. He says you start from tetzava, and the first six aliyahs you go straight to the end of tetzava into kisisa, and you read parsha shkalim, meaning you basically read extra. Now, you now go repeat the Parsha Shkalim again. So the seventh aliyah ends up being the Shkalim aliyah, even though you've just read it, which means you're effectively repeating those 6 psukim. Now, the reason why you do that is entirely because in order to make it nicker and visible, that's the reason why you're doing it. Meisvei. So Gemara is going to try to ask a kasha, and it's going to be a kasha on Yitzchak Nafcha. We brought this up earlier. Let's say you have Parsha Shkalim, and it falls out on a Shabbos that is smuchala, meaning kisisa is the normal parsha. So either it's tetzaveh or it's vayakel. Smuchala will be either the week before or the week after. So we're talking now, parsha shkalim is falling out on not tetzaveh, or it's falling out. And again, when it says smuchala, it just means it falls out during the week. That by being makdim it to the prior Shabbos, it'll come out that you're doing parsha shkalim the Shabbos before kisisa or the Shabbos after. Bein milafneha tetzaveh, bein milachreha vayakel, kairin oisa v'koifan oisa. You read it and you repeat it. So we're going to understand the Gemara now, not like we understood it earlier, because the way we understood it earlier was the maskana of our Gemara here. So let's understand it like the Havamina. The Havamina is that what does it mean when it says bein milachreha? Koifan oisa, kairin oisa v'koifan oisa. It means you read it and you read it again, which sounds a lot like what Abaye just suggested, that you read the 6th aliyah all the way into the end of Parsha Shkalim, and then you read Shkalim again. Sounds like very much like Abaye. The Gemara says, Bishlam ala Abaye nicha. It works, because if you...
If it's Vayakel, how would you repeat it?
You're asking the Gemara's question.
Okay.
Yeah. It's always a sign who's paying attention.
I mean, if it's afterwards.
Meaning, the whole brisa doesn't make sense. There's 2 ways to read the brisa. Does the brisa mean on the Shabbos of Shkalim you repeat it, or does it mean repeating it, meaning the week before and then you're following it up, or you're reading it and then you're following it up the week after? So if you go with the second one, it's not a kasha. If you go with the first one, the Gemara is trying to prove that it only fits with Abaye, but it really only fits with Abaye when it's on Tetzaveh. When it's on Vayakel, it doesn't work out, because what are you going to read on Vayakel? You're going to read last week Kisisa. Now it's Vayakel. You're going to read Parshas Vayakel, and you're going to repeat it. But no one's going to think that's a problem, because that's going backwards. It's only when it's B'Tetzaveh that you're continuing going forward into Kisisa that it's an issue. So really, the Gemara is going to prove that obviously you can't read the Brisa to support Abaye, because even Abaye is going to have to acknowledge that Vayakel isn't that way. But I just said it outside. We'll read it inside. So Bishlam la Abaye nicha. It works, meaning when it's on Tetzaveh. Ela Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha kasha. So Gemara says, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. What do you mean? Well, Abaye nicha. Yeah, exactly. He's like Ravasi, basically.
Wow.
Ravina, maybe. Ravina, Ravashi.
That's again.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of them was a doctor. I don't know, Ravina, Ravashi. No rayas, but Teinach Lefaneha, that works for Parshat Tetzaveh, because it's going to look very funny if you're right. It repeats. La'achreha heichem eshkachas la. Elamayis lach lememer. You're going to have to say, what does it mean to repeat it? It means koifle b'shabasas. What is it? What you're going to have? Even Rabbi is going to have to say Vayakel means you're repeating it, only meaning week to week. Last week you read it, and now you're reading it again, because last week because of the parsha, and this week because of the mitzvah. Hachanami says, so to me, I'll say even beforehand it's the same thing. What have you really begun? Koifle b'Shabbos.
That doesn't mean you're reading twice on one Shabbos.
Right, meaning that's the answer that Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha is going to say. You don't have a raya. Now, practically speaking, like I mentioned before, there's not really negate. We pass it like a baye, right? We don't. You just read it, but that's also because we say a kaddish in between, and so for us, there's already a hecker. You accomplish both by having kaddish. So we read Tetzaveh all the way to the end, and then we do maftir, and the maftir is the mitzvah of Parsha Shkalim. Okay. Now this is a little bit stark, and I'll just point out just very quickly. I do believe that based on the way the weeks work and the calendar works, the case we just read and the case we're about to read cannot happen. Meaning, even though it's theoretically speaking possible, if you're Mekadesh the month al piriyah, that it can work out based on the way we set up the calendar without getting too complicated, mostly because I don't really understand it, or at least I don't remember it. It can't work out that we'll end up having Parsha Shkalim either on the week of Kisisa, Vayakel, or Tetzaveh. It can fall out on Pekude. That actually is very negay. It can come up all the time, but it can fall out the other way. Okay, so let's just understand the Gemara.
Because of which parashas we double, and in theory, if we double differently,
We could choose to do it.
It's
It's
not the calendar. It's the
well,
doubling
it's the
of
calendar
parsha.
that causes the year to be short. That we then
Right.
have to take the 51 parsha, whatever it is, and to
Right.
slip them
But
into.
I'm saying we could double the parshas differently. That may be like
Yeah,
a separate
yeah, that's
takana
true.
from the calendar.
Correct. In a non-leap year, when we have to double things up significantly.
Mhm.
Yeah, correct. Okay. What happens if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out during the week after Parshas Kisisa? Where now Kisisa, the Shabbos we're going to be doing Shkalim on, you now have really a problem because now you're literally reading the Parsha of Shkalim and then following it up again with Shkalim. So here I actually think this is a little bit easier because it's at the end.
Going back.
Yeah, so it makes sense, but we'll see. What do you do? Karashisa min vasisa ad vayakel. He says you don't start from the beginning of the parsha. He says you literally jump in 6 psukim, start from Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor,
Really?
vasisa kir nechoshes, v'chana nechoshes larachta, and you go on from there to the end of the parsha, and you literally read vasisa ad vayakel, meaning v'layad b'chlal, right? You don't read vayakel. Vayakel is irrelevant here. He's just pointing out that you go up to the end of Parshas Kisisa. And then what do you do for Shvi'i? V'chad kari mechisisa ad ve'asisa. You go back to the beginning, and you then read Shkalim. He holds that it was a tremendous chiddush. I mean, he's saying not only do you not... Now, again, it's a major chiddush for us because we're so used to laning Kisisa. We call it Kisisa, and the Gemara is calling it Kisisa. But really, the idea that we stop there and we call it Kisisa versus stopping 6 psukim later and calling it... Why not? In Loilam, it could have just been called Parshas Kior. It could have just gone right with Kior, Trumat Tzava, Kior, and then but instead we
Then
did
you have to-
Kisisa.
Previous week, you'd have to read into Kisisa.
Okay, so what?
It's not clear that they originally covered the whole Torah. They
No,
may
no,
have just
no.
taken selective parsha.
Oh, yeah?
So
Yeah.
you're allowed to skip, and then they skipped this. And
Yeah,
then
we
they-
said you're allowed to skip as long as you're not Tircha Tzibura, whatever. I mean, it's either way. So what is he suggesting? He's suggesting you start 6 psukim in, then you read. The bigger chiddush here isn't that you're starting later. The bigger chiddush is that you're going out of order. And that's actually machlekes haposkim. There's a machlekes haposkim halach lamaisa. Are you allowed to read out of order?
But we
And depending
saw-
upon which sheet you go
saw
with-
Megilla, we said you're not, which implied that Chris Satori
Could be. I don't know if the diak is 100%. Yeah.
We said that's because they mukta muchar batorah.
Yeah, that could be a little bit of a different. Yeah. It's a little bit of a different argument, but same idea.
Okay.
Over here, there's a machlekes haposkim whether you're allowed to even lane out of order. In which case, then maskif labaye can be read depending upon which sheet in the poskim you go. You have to read the Gemara slightly different. So let's just work it out inside. So it falls out that it's on Kisisa. So you're laning Kisisa, and you have a problem because you're also doing Shkalim. So Yismach Nafcha says, in order to avoid the seeming repetition, which for some reason we wouldn't conclude that it was L'tzorech HaMitzvah. Maybe we would assume that if you started from the beginning of Kisisa and you're now going back and reading it again, maybe the thought is that it's almost like, you know what, you're just fixing the reading you did before or something like that, and therefore by not reading it in the beginning and now doing it out of order, that itself is a hecker. Maskif labaye hashta amri lemafreya hu dekari. So here the way to read the Gemara is either if you hold that lemafreya is usser, you could just read it pashut and say the question is how can you do that? You're reading lemafreya. But if you hold that lemafreya is mutter, then the question here can't be if mafreya is mutter, then that really isn't an argument. So what does it mean? People are going to say that it's not that there's a problem that they're reading out of order, because you're allowed to read out of order. People are going to say either that you didn't read earlier, or they're going to say I'm not really
It's similar to the Hashta Amri Okme.
Yeah, it's like a concern. It's a concern.
They won't think it's for Shkalim. It's just to catch up on the part you missed.
Maybe you missed up something before. Since you're reading it now, this isn't a mitzvah. This is just the guy started too late, and so therefore, what is he doing? He's making up what we missed earlier. But really, la'olam, this isn't l'tzarech Shkalim.
In fact, the word Hashta Amri imply that over the
so
others.
that's
the others have to explain the word Hashta Amri.
And Rashi learns that way. Rashi learns this way. El Amar Abaye karu shisa ad vayakel. So what do? You read the all of Kisisa up until Vayakel in the 6th aliyahs. V'chad tani ukari mechisisa v'asisa, and he says exactly what Lashitasa. He says, and then you go back and you do Shkala, which makes a ton of sense. And Yetanya Kavas Dabaye kaschali yos b'chisisa atzma kairin oisa v'koiflin oisa, which sounds exactly like that sheet. Okay, 2 lines in the fat lines continuing in the Gemara. Chali yos b'soicha Shabbos magdim l'Shabbos sha'avra. So just very quickly, what did it say in the Mishnah? It said, what happens if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out during the week? We said in the Mishnah that you bring it to the Shabbos before that, right? So we're going to be discussing over here a couple of different cases as it relates to when we're makdim it. And we'll see there's a couple of machloks in between Rav and Shmuel, really throughout all of the Dalet Parshas potentially, about whether when it falls out on Erev Shabbos, do we push it to the next Shabbos, or does it still go back? And we'll discuss in the Gemara. Itmar Rosh Chodesh Adar Shechal Hiyois be'erev Shabbos. So let's say you have Rosh Chodesh Adar, so it's on Erev Shabbos, and so now the question: what's really the question? Meaning, that according to the Mishnah was very clear. You push it to the previous Shabbos, right? So Rav Amar Makdimin, which is how you would assume. However, Shmuel says interestingly Amar Ma'achrin. He says no. Now it's on Friday. That goes to the next, and it could be just push it in the diak in the lashon of the Mishnah. Rosh Chodesh Adar Shechal Hiyois be'erev. Sorry. Chal Hiyois besoch HaShabbos. Besoch implies that it's in between it's in the middle of the week. It's inside the week. To say that it falls on Friday, I think you can call that besoch HaShabbos. That's a little bit maybe, I mean, I would have said if reading the Mishnah that it means just not Shabbos. Besoch means in between Saturday, right? But besoch could also mean that Friday, which is the last day of the week, so to speak, before Shabbos, that's already not called Socha week, that's Sofa week, and therefore it's going to be pushed to the next one. But I don't think Shmuel is being medayik the lashon. He would say that that's how you'll read it. He has a svara. So Rav Amar Makdimin, and what's the reason why even on Erev Shabbos? And he explains, interestingly, not because the Mishnah says we do it. He says the reason is because the imkain batzri lahu yoimei shulchanos. So if you remember yesterday, we discussed it briefly, but Rosh Chodesh Adar was the time when they would announce that everyone should go get their machzah shekel together to donate to the Beis HaMikdash in order to cover the karbanas tzibur, right? So what ended up happening was they would make the announcement on Rosh Chodesh Adar, and they would want to give 2 weeks at least in order to be able to have. So they would have Parsha Shkolim happen, where there would at least be 2 weeks for them to then set the tables up, and then for the tables to be set up by the 15th. So that everything would work out. They'd have enough time to announce it, so that from that point in time until it would come the time for Nisan, they'd have all of the machzah shekel set up. So now, in order to set that the tables up, they were set up on the 15th. So let's just work out the cheshbon here. Let's say Erev Shabbos is what? Erev Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh Adar. So that means the first of Adar is on a Friday. So that means Shabbos is that Shabbos is the second. So what's going to happen is the following Shabbos is going to be the 9th, right? Besides, but I'm saying it's going to be the 9th.
And then you'll set up the...
And then, but then the next Shabbos is going to be the 16th. So that's going to be less than the 15 days, right? Because since you're setting it up on Friday, that next Shabbos is going to be the 15th, and therefore it's going to end up being less than the amount of time that you would want them to do it. So Rav says, therefore, you go to the week before, so you push it to whatever it works out to be, the 24th of the prior month. Shmuel Amar Ma'achrin, he says, no, you do it to the next day. Why? Amar Lach, sof, chameser b'malei shabsa mikla, right? What does it come out? It comes out to the 15th is on a Friday. And since it's anyways not going to be done on that day, because Rashi says it's not covered Shabbos, that they're going to put the tables out mamish right before Shabbos, you're anyways pushing it to Sunday. It's only going to end up coming out on Sunday, and so therefore anyways, you're going to have the 15 days beforehand. So hilkach ma'achrin, therefore there's nothing wrong with pushing. Now again, this isn't as far as to why we're ma'acher, it's why you're allowed to be ma'acher. But they're not really discussing whether you should be. So it seems like Rav and Shmuel hold that when it falls on Friday, they argue about how to read the Mishnah. Does that mean besoch or does it mean sof? Right? If it means sof, right, then in Chanami you would say like Rav that even sofa the Shavuot falls to the end. Shmuel will say that when it says in the Mishnah besoch HaShabbos, it means literally up until and not including Friday. That'll already go to the next week. What right do you have to do that? You have a separate problem of the 15 days. Shmuel says, what do you mean? It works out perfectly. That Friday is going to be a 15th, and you anyways need to push it to Sunday. So there's not a kasha on Shmuel. So let's maybe see a little bit more. Tanan chalihi ois besoch HaShabbos makdimin l'sha'avar umafsikin l'Shabbos acheres. So what does it say? The Mishnah says chalihi ois besoch HaShabbos. If Rosh Chodesh Adar falls during the week, what do? We're makdimin it to the previous week. Umafsikin l'Shabbos acheres. That's what it said in the Mishnah. I just want to make sure one thing. Right, so let's just work it out. So if it falls out during the week, we read Parsha Shkolim the prior week, and now we have a couple of extra days there. So in order to make sure that we have Parsha Zochar right before Purim, we skip a week where it's like a regular week and we're mafsik. So my love, afilu be'erev Shabbos. right? Meaning
You
the simple read is that even if it falls on a Friday, because that din would be true, you would skip the following week. And the Gemara says, no, Shmuel will tell you, I'll read that the same way I read the other line in the Mishnah, like B'soich Shabbos Davka, and it means not B'sof Shabbos, and therefore he'll assume Friday goes to the next one, which will work out, because if Rosh Chodesh Adar were to fall on Friday, you read it on the following Shabbos, and you still would be skipping the following week, and it would work out. Tashma. Ezo hi Shabbos Rishona. Again, another question about Rav and Shmuel. Ezo hi Shabbos Rishona. So this is going to be referencing a brisa at the end of today's daf. That's a longer brisa that actually goes through each one of the 4 parshias and asks this question. Which means we're going to sort of learn it up now, and then we get to the Gemara later on. It'll be a quicker read. And Rabbi, just in case there's any anxiety over coverage, the second half of the Amud is very short.
And we're going to the Mishnah.
We're going to the Mishnah. We're going to get to the Mishnah.
Okay,
yeah, that's the plan. Okay, so let's read it inside.
Yeah, we haven't seen short Amudim like this for a long time.
Don't worry, but Basra's coming. We'll get there. Yeah. Okay, Tashma. Ezu hi Shabbos Rishona. So main mitzvah. Ezu hi Shabbos Rishona, meaning what is Parsha Shkalim? How does it work out? Kol shechal rosh chodesh adar lihios besocha. Okay, v'afilu be'erev Shabbos. So here you have a brisa that seems to imply, pretty straightforward, not like Shmuel. You say even the Friday of that week after Rosh Chodesh Adar, if it Rosh Chodesh Adar, would fall on even the Friday, it goes to the prior Shabbos. That's a simple read. My love, afilu be'erev Shabbos dumya desocha, meaning what? Ma socha makdimin. If it falls out on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, you bring it back to the prior Shabbos. Af erev Shabbos makdimin also, meaning not like Shmuel. Amar Shmuel, no, you're misinterpreting what that brisa says. When it says Ezu hi Shabbos Rishona kol shechal rosh chodesh adar lios besocha, really amend it to read ba, meaning the other lihios ba, and really he understands the brisa to be telling us that when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on Shabbos, that Shabbos is no. So I can read it. Lihios besocha, but when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on Shabbos itself, you read Parsha Shkalim that Shabbos. The afilu be'erev Shabbos, meaning, and even if the Shabbos the day before, you push it to that Shabbos. So he understands it. That if it falls Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you go to the previous Shabbos. But it falls on Friday because of the din that if it falls on Shabbos, the brisa says that you read Shkalim then, and if it falls on the day before that, you read it then. Therefore, it fits. V'chein tana de Shmuel, but he's not bringing a raya because he is Shmuel, right? So obviously it makes sense. But
what's the word? What were you saying?
But literally means there's right. With socha, where it says over there, it says chalios b'Shabbos.
Socha can exclude Friday. You're saying.
So I'll say it this way. I think it's a little cleaner. Right. Is when it says in the brisa shechal rosh chodesh adar lihios. Right. Besocha would imply in the middle of the week. Right. But he changes it to be adar lihios ba. Okay. So now instead of the word Shabbos under kol shechal rosh chodesh adar lihios ba. Right. What does it read the brisa? Tashma. Ezu hi Shabbos Rishona. What is the Shabbos Rishona? Okay. So the word Shabbos there. What does it mean? Does it mean the day Saturday or does it mean the week? That's really the question, right? So kol shechal rosh chodesh adar lihios besocha will mean that it means the week. But if you make it to ba, now it means on Shabbos itself. In which case, then the next line, v'afilu be'erev Shabbos, means a completely different thing.
Which means the price is not covering all possibilities.
All it's talking about is these two scenarios.
The hard ones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
V'chein tana de Shmuel ba, meaning Shmuel and his base medrash, meaning the point here of the Gemara is that Shmuel felt not only confident that that's pshat in the Mishnah, but that's actually the girsa. V'chein tana de Shmuel ba, he changed the girsa, or he had the girsa of that brisa to mean ba. And we'll see this same cheshbon in a little bit. Kitanoi, the machlekes Rav and Shmuel that we're discussing here about what it falls on Erev Shabbos is really a machlekes tanoi. Misargin, and here the word misargin means very similar to what it meant in the Mishnah mafsikin. Misargin here just means that there's going to be, remember, Adar could be 4 weeks, 4 Shabboses, or it could be 5 Shabboses, depending upon how the calendar works out. If, let's say, Shabbos is one of the first days of the month, you'll get 5 Shabboses. So if you have 5 Shabboses in the month of Adar, you're going to have oftentimes at least one of the weeks, potentially we'll see 2 of the weeks, if it falls out where Rosh Chodesh ends up being, Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out in, how does it work? If it falls out on the Shabbos of the next month, then you don't have Parshas Chodesh and Adar, you can actually skip 2, and we'll see this on the Gemara Namid Beis, where we'll discuss the Nigerian language of what is it? Zatu Bodad Ubiu. I don't know if you guys know what that is. We'll get to it. Zatu. I'm scaring you. Don't get nervous. It's really easy. It's just it's an acronym that helps us figure out when the different Shabbosim fall out, which Shabbos is.
That was Nigerian.
No, I'm just saying it's when you say it, it sounds Zatu Badad Ubiu. It sounds like I'm from whatever Swahili, whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's just the notrikun of we'll see. I'll explain. It's not that hard. Misargin l'Shabbosas, right? So Divrei Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says that you skip Shabboses. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer ein misargin. You don't skip. What do you mean you don't skip? How do you? There's only 4 special Shabboses, and you have oftentimes more than 4 Shabbos weeks in the month of Adar. Rabbi Shimon ben
Plus
Elazar.
one of them is often before.
Yeah.
So, that helps also.
Right. Meaning if it ends up being that it doesn't fall out on Shabbos,
Right.
then you have right. So you might do that. Right. Exactly. So this one I argue that you don't skip. What do I mean? Bisman shechal lihiyos be'erev Shabbos. This is only when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on Erev Shabbos, meaning then what do? You don't skip because you're not going to the prior week. You're actually going till tomorrow. And that'll be like Shmuel. And since in that month, when it falls out on Erev Shabbos, and let's just work it out. If it falls out on Erev Shabbos, so that means Parsha Shkolim is that Shabbos, then the following Shabbos is already going to be the Shabbos before Purim. So that'll be Parsha Zachar. The following Shabbos will be Para, and the following Shabbos will be Parsha Chodesh, because Parsha Chodesh is going to be before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. You'll end up knocking out every single one of the weeks, and there's therefore no skip in that month. But that is only true according to the Shita of Rev Shimon ben Elazar. According to the Tanakama, according to, who is it?
Rabbi
Yehuda Nasi, Rebbe, that wouldn't be true, because you would be taking that Friday's Rosh Chodesh and pushing it to the week before, which means you'd be pushing it to Shvat. You'd be pushing it into Shvat, because Rosh Chodesh Adar fell on a Friday, so the previous Shabbos
You'd skip between Zachar and.
you'd skip the first Shabbos. That Shabbos after
That's
Friday
right.
would be skipped because it's not special. Right. The following Shabbos you would go Zachar, and then he would agree to the rest of it. You go Zachar, Para, and Chodesh. So therefore, you see, there's a machlokes Tanaim, which is really the machlokes Rav and Shmuel, in which case then okay, tov. Aval b'zman shechalios b'socha Shabbos maktim v'korim. I didn't read this inside. He says b'zman shechalios b'erev Shabbos. Aval b'zman shechalios b'socha Shabbos. Then maktim v'korim Shabbos she'avra afal pi shehu Shvat, which by the way is exactly the same sheet as Rabbi Anasi, like we just explained. Okay, continues the Gemara b'shnia Zachar. So that's Parsha Shkolim, and there's a machlokes Rav and Shmuel about what happens when it falls on Erev Shabbos. Let's read it now inside for the second one. What does it say? The Bryce is going to continue. The Mishnah said that what do you read? You read on the second Shabbos. I'm reading the Gemara here. I'm choosing to define it the way I'm defining it because it's like Rav the way I'm reading it. B'shnia Zachar. So let's just remember, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said that when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls during the week, right? Right? Shechal lihos b'Shabbos, sorry, Korin b'Parsha Shkolim. When it falls on Shabbos, you read Parsha Shkolim on that Shabbos. If it falls during the week, you're making to the prior Shabbos, and then it said the words umafsik in the Shabbos achar is fine, and then it said b'shnia Zachar. So how did you read the Mishnah? Is it Mishnah when it says b'shnia Zachar? Is it going on when it falls on Shabbos, or is it talking about either one? Depending upon which one, it's either going to be a Raya to Rav and a Kash on Shmuel, or maybe Shmuel has an answer. So we'll see it inside. Itmar. Purim shechal lihiyos be'erev Shabbos. What happens if Purim falls out on Erev Shabbos, right? So Purim, that's Chal on Erev Shabbos. Let's work it out. That means the 13th is on a Friday, right? So Rav Amar Makdimin.
The 13th is on a Thursday. The 14th.
Sorry, 14th, thank you. Rav Amar Makdimin LeParsha Zachar, meaning the prior Shabbos is Parsha Zachar. Shmuel Amar Ma'achrin. He says you do Parsha Zachar after Purim. Right. We obviously don't hold like that. And what's his svara? So for Rav Amar Makdimin Ki'ech Delay Tikdum Asiya, which we're going to understand to mean the Suda, right? L'Zechira, meaning the Sudas Purim, we don't want that happening after the Zechira. We don't want, right? We don't want it to happen, before the Zechira. We want to first read Parsha Zachar and then have that week, you have the mitzvah of the Sudas Purim. Ushmuel Amar Ma'achrin, from Friday do you go into Shabbos? Why? Amar Lecha, he'll say, I'll answer it up. Again, they're arguing be'etzem. Do we consider Friday part of the previous week, or do we consider it already part of the next week? It's just that if I have an external reason to maybe say, like, you know what, let's make it to the prior week, even Shmuel might agree, but if he can find a way around these external reasons, he's going to leave it going to the following week. So he'll say, Rav has a concern that is a good concern. We don't want to have the Asiyah, meaning the Sudas Purim, happening before the Zechira, meaning the reading of Parsha Zachar. So therefore, Rav says you go to the prior week. Shmuel says, no, I get a way around it. How? Amar Lach, he'll say the following. Kivan de Ika Mukfin. Since you have cities like Yerushalayim that are walled, and therefore what do? The Avdi B'Chemisar, they celebrate Purim on the 15th. And if they're celebrating it on the 15th, they're having their Suda on the 15th. Asiya Uzechira Behade Hadadi Ka'asyan. You have the Suda and the reading of Parshas Zachar happening on the same Shabbos. And since the Shabbos morning you're laning first and you're having the Suda later on, then it's okay.
What
So,
would Shmuel's reasoning be? I mean, like, why would you?
meaning,
do
why
it?
would? Oh, so that's what I was trying to say before. It seems clear that Rav and Shmuel have a fundamental argument about how we treat Erev Shabbos. Is Erev Shabbos the last day of the week, or is it really the beginning of the weekend?
Like in Israel, they call Friday and Shabbos the weekend.
Yeah.
So
So
Sunday,
basically, you're saying it's like Shabbos, basically.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
associated with that Shabbos.
right. So think of it as the aschalt of the Shabbos, right? So do we consider this like the next day, the beginning of the next day, or is it considered? It's a little bit like the discussion of, if you find something during the week, you hold, there's a lot of halachas where it comes up, but here the argument is fundamentally, do we hold Friday is part of this week and part of next week? Now the problem is though, is that it's not like Rav is holding that it isn't also part of next week, and it's not like Shmuel isn't saying that it is also somewhat a part of the prior week. It's just that they each are leaning more towards one of those two sides. And if there's an external reason to not push it to the next week, or to push it to or not to push it the week before, they'll each employ that. And so here Rav is saying, listen, okay, Shmuel, I would be okay, theoretically speaking, pushing it to the following Shabbos, but the problem with doing that is then you end up having Sudas Purim being eaten before you actually lane Parsha Zachar, which is a problem. We don't want to be makdim. And Shmuel's maskim to that. He says, I agree to that svara, but I still say you could do it tomorrow. Why? Because even though you're right, you and I, who are all living in Babel, and we lane the Megilla and eat our Suda on the 14th, which for us will actually be Friday when Purim falls out. But since tomorrow it's going to be for the people who live in the city, it's the 15th, and therefore tomorrow they're going to have their Suda. Therefore, it's going to work out. It's Behadei Hadadi that you're going to end up having Parsha Zachar in the morning, followed by the Suda in the afternoon. I will just point out briefly, what are we talking about over here? Shmuel just said that when you have Purim 14th fall on a Friday, that it works out okay because tomorrow it's Behadei Hadadi. You're going to have the Sudas Purim. After, you're going to lane Parsha Zachar in the morning. This is an example here. It doesn't speak it out in the Gemara, but this is Purim Misholish. This is mamish a case of Purim Misholish. What's Purim Misholish? Purim Misholish is, which can happen nowadays, in Eretz Yisrael, it happens all the time. When you have the 15th fall out on Shabbos, so the halacha is you don't lane Megillah on the 15th, you lane Megillah in Eretz Yisrael on the 14th, right? Meaning, let's say we live in Bnei Brak, we would read on the 14th. The Bnei Yerushalayim would read on the 14th. Us, because that's our day. Them, because they have to be makdim. Suda. When do you do Suda's Purim?
That's a whole thing.
It's the Purim Misholish. Yeah. So what are you supposed to do?
So the different opinions.
There's a massive machlokas we're showing them about what you're supposed to do. When you're supposed to eat the Suda.
We had it a couple of years ago.
We had it. Oh, meaning yeah. We don't have it in America. It's only possible in
No, I'm saying, but we had when they make the suit on Friday, right?
In America, yes, that's when you have it. Yeah. That's when Purim falls out on Friday. Yeah. So here the question is when do you do the Suda? From our Gemara here, if we understand Asiya to mean the Suda, which is the Pashtas, so for the people living in Eretz Yisrael, it's mashma the Gemara that they have their Suda on Shabbos, right? Because what does it say? It says Asiya uzechira behadei hadodi ka'asyan. It's on the same day. We're talking about Shabbos. You're waking up in the morning, you're going to shul, and the 15th is Shabbos. You're going to shul and you're hearing Parsha Zachar, and then you're coming home to eat your Suda, and that's your Shabbos lunch Suda, and it's saying in the Gemara that that's also your Purim Suda. No.
We do it on Sundays.
The Shulchan Aruch, this is a bomb kasha on the Shulchan Aruch. The sheet of the Shulchan Aruch is that a Purim Misholish should have the Suda on Sunday, on the 17th. Sorry, the 16th. The 16th you have your Purim Suda, which is an answer to a riddle. How can you possibly have Sudas Purim where you don't say Al Anisim? And how can you say Al Anisim? How can you have an Al Anisim in a Suda that's not on Purim? Purim Misholish. Because on Shabbos, this is the way it comes out in Shulchan Aruch. On Shabbos, the way we paskin in Yerushalayim, you lane that morning the laning of Purim. Forget Parsha Zachar for a second. You lane that morning the laning of Purim, right? You maftir with Purim, the laning of Purim, and you say Al Anisim in davening, and you say Al Anisim in the Suda. You're sitting at your Suda on Shabbos.
Yeah, it's Purim.
It's Purim. It's the 15th. You say Al Anisim. But it's not a Sudas Purim, because according to the Shulchan Aruch, the Sudas Purim is tomorrow. Yeah. And tomorrow, at the Sudas Purim, no Al Anisim.
Yeah, but that day is Purim.
Okay, but I'm just saying that you're literally having your Sudas Purim. When you get to benching, you get to Al Anisim, and your kid says to you, you say, no. And to me, that's just an interesting thing. But the point is, from our Gemara, you see not like that. Our Gemara says that Shmuel's holding that Shabbos, they would have the Suda, which is a shtickle raya to Meaning, all the poskim say that the Bavli holds you have Yisud on Sunday, But from here's a shtickle raya, so you have to shtup it in. But either way, the svara itself of Shmuel is a pella. I mean, how many people already are having how many people live in walled cities? So I, who live in an unwalled city, can get around the problem of having my asiyah before my zechira because there's a couple of Jews in Yerushalayim who are doing it this way. Unbelievable. Okay. So it says the more about it. Tanan, B'shniya Zachar. Tanan, B'shniya Zachar. It says in the Mishnah that you read Parsha Zachar on the second. So on the second. It doesn't say the second one. So we read it to mean the second Shabbos, right? Meaning the first Shabbos. If it falls on Shabbos, that Shabbos is Parsha Shkolim. And what did we say? We said that, and on the second Shabbos, you'll read it because that's the Shabbos before Purim. And it said in the Mishnah that if it fell during the week, you read Parsha Shkolim the prior Shabbos, you then skip the next week, and then you do Parsha Zachar in the next week. So how do you read when it says in the Mishnah, B'shniya Zachar? For the Gemara, V'haki mikla reish yarcha b'Shabbos, right? Mikla Purim be'erev Shabbos. Right. So what does it say over here? We know that if Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, and that means the first is Saturday, then the following week is the 8th Saturday, and the following week is the 15th Saturday. So that means when's Purim? It's on the 14th, it's the day before Erev Shabbos. And it says in the Mishnah, Mikla Purim be'erev Shabbos, right? So that means that Purim is on a Friday. And when that happens, it says Uktani b'shniya zachar, that you're going to read it on the second week, which will be the prior week, not the day after Purim, right?
Yes, that's good.
That works like Rav. It's against like Shmuel. Yeah, that's like Rav because Rav holds that you are makdim Parshas Zachar to the prior Shabbos, and here what we're saying is you're reading the second Shabbos of the month Parshas Zachar, which in this scenario would mean even right. What does it say in the Mishnah? The Mishnah says Rosh Chodesh Adar Shechal Lihios b'Shabbos. It falls on Shabbos. Korin Parsha Shkolim, and then the end of it says and B'Shniya Zachar, and then in the second week you read Zachar. According to Shmuel, it's the third week.
Right, it's the second time.
Right, yeah. So that's the problem. Meaning, and because I'm understanding, and the Gemara is understanding, when it says B'Shniya in the Mishnah, it means Shabbos. The second week of Shabbos. Amar of Papa, my Shniya lahafsaka. The way you'll have to understand it is it doesn't mean the second week of the month, second Shabbos of the month. It means the second week from the hafsaka, meaning he understands that the statement there of B'Shniya isn't going on the case when it falls on Shabbos, right? When Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbos, he's talking about when it falls during the week. So when it falls during the week, you're makdim, everyone agrees to the prior Shabbos, Shkolim. Then the next week is a skipped week. The following week is Parsha Zachar, which will be the second week from the skip. That's how he reads
it. And again, it's one of those where the Havamina is a very cursory reading. But,
yes.
But instead, Rishona, Shniya, Shlish, everyone has hafsakos. So everyone
Tashma. Ezo Shabbos Shniya. Kol shechal Purim lihios besocha v'afilu be'erev Shabbos. So here's another simple read. It says Ezo Shabbos Shniya. This is the brisa later on, which is when is Parsha Zachar. Kol shechal Purim lihios besocha v'afilu be'erev Shabbos. So my lav erev Shabbos do me the socha ma socha makdimin af erev Shabbos makdimin, which would mean like Rav. Amar Shmuel, no, we'll say the same answer here as we said earlier. Besocha does not mean in the middle of the week; it means on Shabbos itself. And if it's falling out on Shabbos, therefore, the day before is also read like that, which means the following week, which would fit like Shmuel. Meaning, again, the same machlokes Rav and Shmuel that we're finding in Shkolim, we find in Zachar. We're asking the same kashas and answering the same answers. Amar, lost a spot. Yeah, there we go. Chalihiyos b'Shabbos atzma. Chalihiyos b'Shabbos atzma. If Purim falls on Shabbos, now again, nowadays we would be pushing this off. This doesn't happen nowadays with our calendar, but before. This is a calendar thing, meaning if we would be Mekadosh al Piriya, you could have Purim fall out on Shabbos. What happens if Purim falls out on Shabbos? So what are you supposed to do? Amar of Huna, L'divrei HaKoil ein makdimin. Right? Everyone agrees, even Rav and Shmuel will both say there that you're not makdim. If it falls out on Shabbos, you don't go to the prior week, you read it that day. Meaning it'll come out that you're reading Purim, laning, from B'Shalach, and you're reading Parsha Zachar, and you're reading Shabbos, and that's it, right? So you wouldn't have 3 Sifrei Torah, though, because, again, you'd be basically, right, you'd have that Shabbos. Well, actually, would you? No, you'd have B'Shalach, and you just have that Shabbos, yeah. No, you would. You'd have, that would be 3 Sifrei Torah.
Unless it was considered close enough.
Right, and then they could be Geilo. Right. This would be 3. You'd have that week's Parsha, you'd have Bashalach, and then you'd have the Parsha Zachar.
That's the third possibility, but it's one that we.
It's
Why
really-
is it pressure you wouldn't be Magdalene?
It's really the fifth. It's the fifth possibility. But whatever.
Why is it pressure you wouldn't be Magdalene Parsha Zachar?
Because you want to make it close to Purim. And
Right.
you don't want to make it
So
a week
you do
early.
what?
No,
That'd
that would be
a
like
whole-
2 weeks
It'd
before.
be a whole week.
The whole week.
That's too much.
It's too much. Yeah.
We
Even-
want it to be in the week, not
Sorry.
the week before.
Okay.
Right. Similar to the halachas, let's say, of if like when we say like Tisha B'Av and Shvuah Shechal B'Av. It's not called Shvuah Shechal B'Av if it's mamish that week. Although I'm not sure if that's true. I think it could be when it comes to Shvuah Shechal B'Av for Tisha B'Av and for other halachas, or when it comes to, for instance, slichas, like when it comes out when Rosh Hashanah is going to fall out, depending upon.
That's because we don't want the period to be too short. But here, we want it to be
Yeah,
as
right.
short. We want it to be as
Right.
close as possible.
So okay, so Amar Rav Huna ledibra hakol ein makdimin. Rav Nachman says no. Amar Adayin hi machlekes, meaning Rav might still say you're makdim, like the rabbi says. And it Menami Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Rav, meaning that's the important part here. Purim shechali is b'Shabbos makdim v'kardi b'Shabbos avar l'zachar. So there's a machlekes Amoraim about whether another machlokes Amoraim even exists. It's almost like a fake here. You can almost say like either the halach is like tzad A or it's like B, and even if it's like B,
What do we do nowadays? If it falls on Shabbos,
Purim doesn't fall on Shabbos.
we push off the Sunday, or never.
Meaning the way we set the calendar up now, it has it that Purim can never fall on Shabbos. The only place it can fall on Shabbos is in Eretz Yisrael, which would be a Purim Mishulach. And what we do, if you like drinking, is what you do is you spend your Thursday going to hear Megilla that night
Yeah,
in Bnei Brak. You wake up in the morning.
But in Shalayim, by Purim Sholosh, they would lay Zachar a week before.
Oh yeah, meaning the Shiloh of when you do Zachar.
They would do it.
Rob may not have liked that, different shuls. One davens earlier, one already did the Megillah, the other one's doing Zachar after that in the same community.
Meaning you're saying Rav may not have liked it according to Rav Huna.
Right.
But yeah, okay.
Right. To explain that,
Yeah.
why he says it's even necessary, according to that shita, to
Right.
move it a week early.
Could be. Either way. Okay,
Yeah.
so we just knocked out Shkolim and Zachar. Let's move on to Para.
What's the reason for Purim? Why do we read Purim?
The Tumah for the carbon pesach.
Oh, yeah.
It's a way. The par is the way that everyone.
All of these parshas are in Adar as a preparation for Nisan,
I see.
right? So you have the Shkolim, which was for the Karbanas, Zachar, which is really more for
So
Purim,
we move par as close to Nisan as
right?
we can.
Which is
rather
why
than-
when you have a skip,
Mhm.
we always make the rule is you always put parshas Chodesh and parshas Par right before it.
Right.
You don't do Zachar then Par then skip and then go Chodesh. You always go.
They collected money for the prayer. They collected money for the prayer.
I'm assuming if it was a communal need, then the Machzah
So that's what they
Shekel.
were doing.
Well, no, the
No,
Machzah
he's
Shekel
saying
was.
because you should get clean for the.
Not they were collecting money for the prayer.
You're not correcting money. You're saying, but you should become.
Make sure you do it.
Carbon Pesach.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Brisa, which
Which
was
two collections in 2 weeks would be too much for people.
yeah, even in a crazy shul like ours, the Shlishis.
Yeah, right. That's what he's master of the art scroll.
Oh yeah,
No, Mechavan. I was Mechavan to art school.
Rabbi Arthur.
Right.
Yeah.
Rabbi Arthur, yeah.
Very good.
The Shlishis.
Actually, it's
I don't know what it says about our generation if that's become the thing. Like, like Rabbi, you're right. It says it so in the art scroll,
I know.
right?
Actually, it was
Plus-
probably Rashi.
Oh, okay.
This joke's been going on for 30 years.
I know.
The kids say
These
that.
are the Rabbi Ashkel's. It's a 30-year joke.
Rabbi, you and Google.
Google, right?
Yeah.
The Shlishis Parda Aduma. Taner Rabbanan. Ezo Hisha B'Shlishis Kol Shesmucha LePurim Achrel. Which is the right said in our Mishnah that when is Parshas Para? Parshas Para is actually this is the Brisa. Ezo Hisha B'Shlishis, the Parshas Para, Kol Shesmucha LePurim Achrel, meaning wherever Purim falls, it's the Shabbos afterwards, which really isn't the right way to say it,
Yeah.
because it's really not true when it's a little bit later, but we'll see. Itmar Reb Chama bar Chanina Amar Shabbos Hasmuch LaRosh Chodesh Nisan. That no, it's the other way. You go, it's the Shabbos that's as close to Rosh Chodesh Nisan as possible. So how does that work? Which one is it, right? Is it the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, or is it the Shabbos after? Shabbos after Purim. V'lei pligi. Ha de'ikla Rosh Chodesh Nisan b'Shabbos. When Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbos, then it's the one after Purim. Ha de'ikla be'emtza Shabbos, and the other one is when Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out in the middle of the week. In which case, then if it falls out in the middle of the week, then you're pushing it to the next Shabbos.
I
Right.
think the other way. If Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls on Shabbos, then that Shabbos gets Parshas Chodesh. The Shabbos right before
It's Para.
is Para, and there's a skip after Purim.
Right.
Yeah,
But did I not say that?
I think.
That could be. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, right. So let's just make sure we have that. If it falls out, right. If Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbos, that Shabbos is Parshas Chodesh. The prior Shabbos is Parshas Para. The prior Shabbos to that is a skip, and the prior Shabbos to that would be Zochar, and in between Zochar and that skip Shabbos would be Purim. And if it falls out during the middle of the week, then the prior Shabbos to that is Parshas Chodesh, in which case then the week prior to that is Para, and the week prior to that is Zochar, right? Because the Purim would fall in between.
Oh wait, so if Nisan is during the week, Rosh Chodesh Nisan during the week, prior one is HaChodesh.
If Rosh Chodesh Nisan is during the week, then Parshas Chodesh is the prior
Prior
Shabbos.
one, and then the prior one before that is Para.
So you
Parshas
don't need,
Para.
so you don't need a skip.
You don't need a
You
skip.
don't need the
I see.
second skip in that
I
case.
see, okay, fine.
That I think will be when we say later on, when we say Zatu Boy Dud Ubiu, that's the bow. When it falls, whatever, we'll get to it. We'll see when the skip is. Okay. The Revius HaChodesh Hazel Lachem. All right, the fourth one was, oh, sorry, did I jump ahead? Yeah. B'shlishes, Baradum, and Rabban Nezina. I got it. The Revius, okay, so now the Bryce is going to go through the Revius HaChodesh Hazel Lachem. Right? HaChodesh Hazel Lachem is the parsha that you're going through. Tana Rabban. Rosh Chodesh Adosh Chaliyah is B'Shabbos. I don't know what these two dots here. This sort of doesn't really belong. But either way. Tana Rabban. Rosh Chodesh Adosh Chaliyah is B'Shabbos. Current Kisisa Umaftirin B'Yehoyod.
Now they're just bringing, I guess, a long
The Bryces, yeah.
all of them.
Yeah, the Ezo He Shabbos Rishonim. These are the Bryces that we quoted as we were going through each of the ones before. The Ezo He Shabbos Rishona, which is Shkolim Kol Shachal Rosh Chodesh Adar Liyas B'Sofa. Ve'afilu be'erev Shabbos, and each one will explain that how they explained it, right? Rav and Shmuel. B'Shnia, the second one, meaning Parsha Zachar, you read from Zachar. Umaftirin Pakadati. Ve'ezo He Shabbos Shnia, which is the Shabbos Shnia, meaning when does it fall out? Kol Shachal Purim Lihiyos B'Socha ve'afilu be'erev Shabbos. And again, over there as well, Rav and Shmuel will have an argument about how to read that. B'Shlisha is Para Aduma. Umaftirin v'Zarakti Aleichem. Ve'ezo He Shabbos Shlishis, which is when Para happens. Kol Shesmuch LePurim Ma'achrel. And over there, no one argues about if it falls on Erev Shabbos. Berevius, HaChodesh Hazeh Umaftirin Ko Amar Hashem Elokim Barishon Be'echad L'Chodesh. Be'ezo He Shabbos Revius. Kol Shechal Rosh Chodesh Nisan Lihios B'Socha. And that's true Afilu Be'erev Shabbos. And I do believe that when it falls out on Erev Shabbos, I think Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls on Erev Shabbos. I think Rav and Shmuel will both agree that it goes to the prior week. Okay. Now, just before we go a little bit weiter, let me just walk. I'll walk you through the Rashi. It's a long Rashi. I'm not going to read it inside.
Oh, I didn't learn the Rashi. I see the Zatu. Yeah.
So there's a phrase. It's called Zatu Bo Dud Uviu, and I'll just say it's Rashi explains it. It's a long Rashi. It's not a scary Rashi. It's just big. So the way to read it is the first letter of the four are referring to what day Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on. Depending upon what day it falls out on, the following letters are the date of the month that you skip. So if it falls out on Rosh Chodesh, if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on a Monday, which is Beis, that's the bow, then the week that's skipped is the 6th of Adar, right? Meaning if Rosh Chodesh falls out on a Monday, then that very first week, right, then the prior week is Parshas Shkolim, which is in Shvat. Then the first week of the month is skipped. And that first week, the date of that Shabbos is the 6th. That's Bo. And then that's the only skip, because at that point, the following week after that is Parsha Zachar. The following week after that, you have Purim in between, is followed up by Para, and then Chodesh, and it moves on. Then the second one is...
Other always has, I don't know if this matters, but always has 30 days, Other Shani.
Other Shani always has it, right?
So it's consistent.
Sorry, I skipped the Zatu. What about Zatu? Zatu is Zion. What happens if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbos? So if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbos, then it comes out that is Parsha Shkolim. The following week is Parsha Zachar. Then Purim falls out the week after that. And then the next Shabbos is the 15th, right? That Shabbos is a nothing. That's a skipped week because since Parsha Chodesh is going to happen 2 weeks after that, and you need Para to happen right before Chodesh, you skip that week, and it's the only week that's skipped. The Dud is a simple one. That is if Rosh Chodesh falls out on a Wednesday, right? If it falls out on a Wednesday, right? Yeah, Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
If it falls out on a Wednesday, then what's that coming Shabbos? That coming Shabbos is the 4th. And that Shabbos would be no different than Bo. Bo and Dud are the same. Meaning when it falls out in the middle of the week, that first Shabbos is going to be skipped. And the last one is Uviu when you count the Vav here. It's not and Bu, it's Uviu. When it falls out on Friday, when you have Rosh Chodesh Adar falling out on Friday, then, and here we're going to go like Rav, right? We're going to say you go to the prior week is Parsha Shkalim, right? The next Shabbos, that Shabbos is the 7th. Sorry, that Shabbos is the 2nd, right? So you skip that Shabbos, and you skip Yud Vav, the 16th, meaning here you're sort of combining the Zatu, and you're combining it with the, well, you're not really combining it with anything else. It's
You get the this.
you
this
get
is
the
two skips,
right.
yes.
You get the Zatu. You're skipping the, well, not Zatu. It's Yud Vav, right?
Yeah.
But you're skipping the 16th because since it falls on Erev Shabbos, that means Rosh Chodesh is on the first, Shabbos is the 2nd. That means the second Shabbos is the 9th, and the third Shabbos is the 16th. So since that third Shabbos is the 16th, that third Shabbos there is a skip. So you're skipping that, and you're also skipping the first Shabbos. So you're skipping between Shkalim and Zachar, and then you're skipping again between Zachar and Para. And then you're going Para Chodesh, and then you're done. So that's what it is over here.
I've noticed before, not only here, that even when they already said Tesvav instead of Yud K, they would sometimes say Yud Vav, where we say Tesai.
Yeah,
That came later.
That shift was
Yeah.
adjustment. Yud K, that was an earlier one.
Right.
Okay, let's just we'll pick up from here. The Chamishis Chozron L'Kesidron. So it said in our Mishnah, after it listed off all of the 4 different weeks, and it says in the 5th week you go back to normal. So what does it mean? Now we saw earlier, this came up earlier. What does it mean? What were you actually laning on these days? We haven't really actually discussed that. We discussed a little bit, what do you do on the Shabbos of Parsha Shkolim? And we said that if Shkolim falls out on Shabbos, right? What did we say? We said we're trying to figure out when do you read Kisisa Tetzava, right? So L'Seder Mai, what does it mean? Chozon L'Kesidron. Rav Abi Omer L'Seder Parshias Uchozer, meaning that during those other 4 weeks, you did not read anything, which is not at all like the Gemara we saw before. The Gemara we saw before had it, the Parsha Shkolim, you read Atat Tetzava, you read Vayakel. Here we're saying, no, you didn't. It
replaced the
replaced it. In fact, what does that mean? I believe the post would speak out. According to him, it would mean you literally, there's only 6 psukim in Parsha Shkolim.
Read it again and again.
You read it again and again and again and again, so you basically are going to get 42 psukim of Shkolim over and over and over again. So there's certainly no concern there about a hecker. You're clearly doing it for some mitzvah. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar, no, we do it, and this is how we pass. Again, let's say they're haftarah chozer. You're only going back to the end, meaning the actual Shabbos parsha is late. It's just that you're returning now to regularly scheduled programming that even the Shvi'i is just from the parsha. So Amar Abaye, Kvasa the Reb Ami Mistabra, which is a little bit strange. The Tanan, Lechol, and he wants to bring a right. Lechol Mafsikin, Leroshe Chadashim, Lechanukah, Lepurim, Latanius, Lemamadas, Liyom Kippurim. What did it say at the end of our mission? It said that on these days you are mafsik, meaning that you lane the laning of that day, that unique special laning, and you don't have the normal laning. And what are we saying over there? We're talking about Chanukah. We're talking about Chanukah can happen on Shabbos, but Purim, maybe the times of the Mishnah, can happen on Shabbos. But Tanios and Mamados, they certainly cannot happen on Shabbos. So that those two have to be going during the week. So what is it referring to? It's referring to the laning of Mondays and Thursdays. So if it's referring to the laning of Mondays and Thursdays, what do we mean that you're mafsikin? There's no haftorah in the middle of the week. So mafsikin has to mean that you're mafsik by literally going back to the whole thing. Because if mafsikin there means you lane only the Mamados, which would be like from Parshas Bereshis, or the Tanios from whatever laning you're having on that day from Vichal, whatever. So then it doesn't make sense. So Bishlam Lamandam, let's say they're Parshias Uchozer Hainudi Parsha Bechol. You can explain it. You're laning a regular Parsha during the week on a Monday and Thursday, so you skip that now and lane the Tanios. You lane the Mamados. Lamanda Omer, let's say they're Haftaros Uchozer, and really what would that mean? That during the week you're reading the weekly laning, like whatever you would normally read on that Monday and Thursday. You're just changing the Haftorah. Haftorah bechol mi'ika. Can you even have such a thing that it's going to be a Haftorah during the week?
But this price has nothing to do with the Parshas.
No, but the Mishnah, it's using. So I didn't explain that. So the Mishnah says, when the Mishnah says it's din, the way it says it is that the Darle Parshios, you're mafsik l'Shabbos acheres. When you skip a week, that's called being mafsik, right? And then at the end it said l'chol mafsikin. Right? When
Not
it's referring to not just Daled Parshias, for other things you're also mafsik in the same way. So I should have spoken this out. When it said mafsikin in the Mishnah, in the Seifa, the assumption is what's happening there is consistent with what was happening in the Reisha. And if mafsikin in the Reisha, meaning the week that you weren't reading one of the Daled Parshias, meant you were chozer, and chozer meant back to reading a full parsha with a regular haftorah, and that implication then would be that during the Daled Parshias, you were literally not reading any of the Parsha of the Shabbos. Then Rashi's saying that, not Rashi, the Gemara is saying that the Sefer will mean that also. And that'll make sense because on the Tanias and the Mamados, there's no Haftorah.
Okay,
So since you're reading a regular week, it works. But if you hold that all it means is that on the Dalet Parshias, you're just being maftir with a different thing. But even during those days, you're reading a regular weekday. So then what does it mean to say that you're mafsik during the week with these other guys where there is no Haftorah to begin with? So the Gemara says, I mean, the answer that I think we would all say on our own, which would be that it's not shver, one more stuff do the other. So Mishnah on the Mandam say the Parsha zu chozer hainu dika Parsha b'chol. Lamandam will say the Haftorah zu chozer Haftorah b'chol miika. More says ve'idech hakadisa ve'hakadis. You'll see no, you're right. Ein chanami. When there's a Haftorah, you have a Haftorah. When there's no Haftorah, you don't have a Haftorah. So when you have a Haftorah, that's what it'll mean. When you don't have Haftorah, ein chanami. Over there, it's going to mean chozer leparshas. Ubetani oisam li hafsaka. Ask the Gemara, what do you need a hafsaka for? A tinus, meaning what? The whole svara behind why you need to have a hafsaka is in order, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah says that what do you do, the way we hold, that you go, let's say that haftorah suchozer, meaning he holds that as much as you possibly can hold on to the regular laning, hold on to the regular laning. And therefore, even when you have Pasha Shkolim, you read the regular Shabbos laning and you're only maftir with Pasha Shkolim. So according to him, why do you have to not lane a regular normal laning on a tinus? Why not just, if it falls on a Thursday, why not just lane in the morning for the Gemara, likri mitzafra binyana diyoma, right? Ubemincha betanisa. So in the morning you'll lane whatever the 3 Aliyah Parsha is that week, and in the afternoon you go ahead and lane Vayechal Moshe. Meaning, according to you, Rabbi Yirmiyah, that you want to try to get everything into the day, why does the Mishnah say that you're mafsik, which is mashma you don't lane at all from that Thursday's laning? Messiah Leila Rav Huna, Rav Huna, which is a Gemara in Tainus. The Gemara in Tainus was talking about over there, how do we handle the day of Tefillah when there's a Tainus Tzibor? Do we start the day by trying to, talk to the community to see who's done Averas, to see if we can do tshuva, and then daven and learn later? Or do we daven and learn in the morning and then do the community outreach in the afternoon? So it's Messiah Leila Rav Huna who says that mitzafra kinufya, you start the morning in the communal discussion around how are we going to get the rain back by doing tshuva, and you finish the day off with laning. Meaning, what does he hold? What do you do on a fast day? Amar Abaye mitzafra lepalgi diyuma, from the morning until halfway through the day until chatzais. Me'aininan b'mili demasa. You have this kinufia, you have this assembly, this meeting where they're discussing everything. And what do you do for the rest of the day? Mipalgi diyuma lepanya riva diyuma, and from that chatzos until the end of the third quarter of the day, karo miftara, you lane and you do the haftarah of a tinus, uvriva diyoma, and the last quarter of the day, boyrachmi yadav to kadosh baruch hu shenemar, and he's going to bring a couple of psukim here, vayikra b'sefer, tayras Hashem lekayim, revius hayoyim, revius misvadim mishtachim. So you see, a quarter of the day is b'tayra and a quarter of the day is b'tfila. There's no raya from that pasuk that it's the first half of the day or the second half of the day. Therefore, the Gemara asks, maybe say that it's the opposite. That pasuk's telling me how to handle the morning, not the afternoon. Don't say that. The pasuk says, I believe this is talking about either Ezra or Nehemiah.
Does this ever establish the question? Like, we asked the question, it doesn't seem to be.
No. Which question?
The question is that fast days, why do we need an interruption? Let's read.
What we're saying is that
meant to read Tainus.
Right. So the question was, according to Rav Yirmiyah, who tries to always keep the regular, normal scheduled programming on point. That's why he only changes the haftorah, the maftir. So he has a way out. You don't have to lose the Thursday normal laning and only lane by Yachal. Like, what happens if a tinus tibur falls on a Monday or a Thursday? What do we lane? We don't lane that week's parsha. We only lane the tinus. Why do we do that? Why not? He suggests in the morning in Chakras, read Thursday's lane, and in the afternoon when you come to Mincha, we'll lane by Yachal. Meaning, which is we anyways lane on a tinus tibur in the afternoon, and you can accomplish both. According to Rabbi Yirmiyah, Elamai must be, you see, that we don't try to knock him out. Once you have one day, and the laning of that day, the tinus tibur knocks out the regular normal laning, maybe we'll say the same thing even on the Dalet Parshias. So he says, no, it's a raya that there is no laning in the morning. Why? Because we hold like Rav Huna, who says that in the morning was when they spent time, they would daven, but there would be no Kriyas HaTorah in the morning. The Kriyas HaTorah would happen at Mincha later on. Since there's only one Kriyas HaTorah, that'll be the Kriyas HaTorah at the tinus. The Gemara is just speaking out now. Okay, so what did they actually do on that day? So this came up in Titus. We saw there's two ways to split it. So now what we're saying is the first pasuk.
Basically, the Seder Yom, because you really can't do this.
Right. The answer of the Gemara is the Seder Yom doesn't allow it because they would only lane once. And now the Gemara is just bringing psukim to support that. The first pasuk is showing how they would split half of the day, a quarter starting in Torah, which means laning enough Torah, and then the second quarter in Tefillah. There's no raya from there if that was the first half of the second half of the day. So the Gemara says, maybe say that's the first half of the day, meaning what? And therefore you'd still be allowed to get 2 lanings in, because you could lane in the second half of the day. Although I don't know if that's so much akasha, because maybe we'll be saying in the afternoon, you would have the congregation coming together. But either way, the Gemara says, so from there I have a separate pasuk. The pasuk says, I'm not sure if it's Ezra or Nehemiah, but the Eli Yasv called Chared b'divrei Elokei Yisrael al ma'al hagola ve'ani yoshev mishamim ad lemin chazerev. It sounds like he was standing around, not doing haftorah, not laning, not learning, not doing any of that stuff. In the morning, he was dealing with the community. Uksiv in the pasuk afterwards says u'minchas ha'erev, and from the second half of the day, kamti mitanesi, I got up from my fast meeting, and that's when I started dealing with laning and davening. Meaning we bring a raya from there that it's referring to the second half of the day, not the first half of the day, and therefore la'olam it'll come out that there's not 2 opportunities and there are times to do it twice. Now nowadays, what do? We do lane it like that. If you have a tiny stibur falls out in the morning, you don't lane a tiny stibur, you lane whatever that their day is, and we do vayichal by the afternoon. In fact, if it falls out on a Tuesday, there's no laning in the morning, we only lane. All right? I mean, on a tiny stibur, we don't lane in the morning, we only lane at mincha. I think.
Tinus
tzibur.
It's not Monday and Thursday.
It's not Monday and Thursday.
In the
you mean
morning.
like the Sarah potatoes and stuff like that?
Yeah.
We don't know, we do lane.
You do?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we do.
What do we lane in the morning? Also vayichal?
Vayichal, yeah.
Oh, that's right. We do vayichal in the morning and we do vayichal in the afternoon. Right. My bad. Yeah.
On Tisha B'Av, we do different lanes.
Right, different lane.
One of the
Plus, there's
things we
Haftorah.
sometimes don't realize, we think that people wrote the siddur based on looking in the